Call the meeting to order. Linda has a sign-in sheet if everybody can just sign in. And we are reviewing the annual school district meeting, which will be held next Tuesday, a week from tomorrow, at 7 p.m. at the Dover Town Hall, not the town office, which is over on Taftbrook Road by the Brick Library, the Brick Building. We usually run through, but I don't see, you folks don't have booklets?
I have one.
Oh, you do? Okay, do you have a booklet? I can loan you one, but I do need it back, please. Oops, sorry, Andy, thank you, Andy. So anyways, on page 2 of the booklet, there's the annual meeting warning. And we'll just run through it quick, and if there's any questions, it's a pretty informal meeting. If you all want to get closer, you can. Hopefully you can hear. My name is Rich Werner. I am the chair of the River Valley School District. Go ahead, Kate.
I'm Kate Rideout, vice chair, and this is Sander.
That's the one who protected us from you guys throwing things, because you may hit the kids, so. Go ahead, Dwight.
Dwight Borum. I'm the clerk for the school board.
I'm Mike Urquhart, and school director.
And we do have Andy's our school clerk, or like a town clerk, but the school clerk. And Andy also doubles as a town clerk in Dover. And if you ever get lost somewhere in the area, Andy may be the one to find you with his dog. So on April 29th, 2024, 10 to 7, there's an Australian ballot. So a few years ago, we changed the way we elected directors for the River Valley School District after a vote. We felt that, what had been working for the first 4 years of the district, 3 years, was working really well, where we had equal representation from the two towns. So we did change it. But because of one person, one vote, what we had to do was we made it so that everybody from both towns get to vote for each school district member, but each town gets to have one person who runs. So you vote for somebody from Dover and somebody from Wardsboro, but everybody votes, and then hey folks, and the votes are commingled, and they're all dumped together, and then they get counted. So that will be happening on the 29th, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. In Dover, it's happening at the town hall. And in Wardsboro, it's also happening at the town hall, which is 71 Main Street. And then on Tuesday at 7 o'clock, we will be meeting at the Dover Town Hall this year. And every other year, we switch sides of the hill. So our first article is elect a moderator, serve for the fiscal year from July 1, 24 to June 30th, 25, and to set a stipend of $200 per meeting per moderator. Any questions, thoughts, comments? Cool. Article 2, to elect a clerk to serve for fiscal year July 1 to June 30th, 25, and to set a stipend of $2,400. And again, is the school district clerk. It's not a clerk for the town. And then B is to set a stipend of $400 for an assistant clerk to be appointed and used at the discretion of the clerk. So unfortunately, because we have to rely on the district on the town clerks to help with elections and stuff, our elected clerk for the school district recommended this a few years ago, and we feel it's important. Article 3 is to elect a treasurer for the district to serve for the fiscal year July 1, 24 to June 30, 25, and to set a stipend of $2,400 for that person. So these are all being nominations from the floor and voting from the floor. And I got to tell you, a few years ago, the moderator, we had 3 or 4 votes, and Andy and I laughed a lot because there was a tie, we thought, and then we did a ballot and there was a tie. And I've never ever in my life seen a tie. And then wasn't it like just right after that at another meeting we had another tie No, it was, we had the tie before the school district meeting at the town meeting. So it was, but unfortunately at the school district, Dr. Backus, who was the retiring moderator, did not wanna make that decision, so, it was quite interesting. And that was at Dover Town Hall like 3 years ago,
It
right?
was not last year, but the year before.
Yeah.
2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there, if you'd been there for that, Chris, that would've been something really exciting to
I
write
was
about.
there.
Oh, were you?
Yeah,
Cool. So what'd you think of that?
that was cool. Interesting.
So Article 4, so the voters, the revised school district set the annual stipend for school directors at $2,500 and the chair for $3,000, and that's, I think, been that way for a few years now. I think almost since River Valley started. Any questions? No? Article 5, so the voters approve mileage reimbursement, the federal reimbursement rate for the month in which mileage occurred, and that is, I think currently it's like 58 cents a mile.
60 something.
60 something,
65, 67.
mid-60s.
Something like that.
Okay. I guess I don't get much mileage, I don't know. So the voters of the River Valley Unified School District approve the school board to move any surplus from the 23-24 budget into the general reserve funds reserved for future uses approved by the voters. Hey, Marco. Hey, Marco, what's the mileage reimbursement right now?
No idea. I'm not at work.
So, anyways, this is an article we've been bringing up for years and years. We brought it up in Dover ever since I was on the board. And what we do is we never know what the surplus or a deficit can be until obviously the year closes out. There's a form that's completed every year by the supervisory union treasurer. It's called a stat report that we submit to the state, all our numbers. And then the state says, okay, this is where you sugared out at the end of the year, and this is how much you raised that you didn't spend, or this is how much you spent that you didn't raise. So we either have a surplus or a deficit. Because both districts originally in the becoming a unified district, we tuition our secondary students 7 through 12. And it's really difficult to predict exactly how many students we're going to have, which schools are going to go to, and how much the tuition's going to be. So usually our biggest variance in our budgets has always been secondary tuition, both the private, independent, and even the public. Because again, we do the best guess we can, but 1 year a family could move out of town with 3 or 4 students in secondary schools, and at $20,000 a student, it's a pretty, can be a pretty big shift. During COVID, we had a lot of families move in that we paid tuition for that we hadn't planned on, and we've been a couple of years catching up, and now a lot of those families have moved on. So we're looking, our treasurer, our supervisory union treasurer is predicting around a $300,000 surplus. Yeah, but again, that's just a prediction. We don't know. A family could move in with 25 students for 2 months, and we'd have to pay tuition for 2 months. So, are there any and the other reason we move it right away is we don't want some people, maybe some people that work under a Golden Dome up north, to see that and say, "Hey, that's our money. We want it back." So we try to move it into our general reserve fund, and then we ask you folks the year after how you want it spent. So it's nothing that we spend, and we don't just do anything with it. We don't, even though 1 year we really thought that the school board should go on a trip to the Virgin Islands in the middle of January, we didn't think that was appropriate, so we chose not to.
67 cents a mile, by the way.
Oh, thank you. You looked it up. There you go. Article 7, so the voters approve the annual tuition rate to approved independent schools at $20,966, called the Burton Sending School Tuition for the 24-25 school year. So we get asked a lot, why is that on every year? And the reason it has to be on every year is the state law says that the school, if you don't have your own school, you shall pay tuition either at the public school's tuition rate or the statewide average tuition rate for private and independent schools, or another rate so voted on annually by the electorate. And you folks are the electorate, so we did get petitioned both, I believe, in Wardsboro before we were a unified district, and in Dover that we approved the Byrne-Burton rate. Originally in Dover, the Byrne-Burton rate was only for Byrne-Burton. The other schools still had the, we specifically voted for Byrne-Burton only. And then a few years after that, it was petitioned that it be any private or independent school. So we've always said that if you get it passed once, we'll keep putting it on the warning until it doesn't pass. And if at one point it doesn't pass, then we would ask that it be petitioned again. And, but again, it's been that way for almost ever since I've been, I guess around 2012 it happened in Dover that we went to everybody got that rate. And I think it was shortly before then with you, or shortly after then with you guys.
Yeah.
Because I remember being at your meeting when that happened. That was when we were talking about unifying.
At least 7 years ago.
Yeah. So are there any questions on that?
The state, I was just looking for the state rate.
Yeah, it's hard to see if you go in the back, because we did ask for that, and I think it's on the secondary tuition sheet. If you look on page 17,
17.
Yeah,
the announced average tuition for Union 7 to 12 students is $19,774.
Yes, there's the rate.
So yeah, so the state rate is $19,774. So it's not much of a difference, and the rate between Leland and Gray and BBA is $101 difference this year.
Yeah. So, and also just to, you always say this, Rich, if you don't mind.
Why didn't I say it?
No, I'm about to say something that you always say if you didn't say it yet. We also, if a student goes to a public school, we must pay that tuition no matter what the rate is, even if it's higher than the state average. Which, like Leland and Gray, for example, is higher than the state average. So we would be required to pay that even without the warning.
So if, let's just say for example, if Burlington's tuition was $40,000 a student and a family wanted to send their child to Burlington High School, which is a public high school, we're responsible for that tuition rate. So I did have a long discussion with somebody the other day about, what are the items that are pushing the budget to cause these increases? And one of the things is, and one of the things that makes it very difficult for us to create a really good budget is the unknown of the secondary tuition. Again, we could have like a family that has 3 students, and this year they're all sending their students to, Brattleboro area middle school, which is 18.3. Well, next year they could decide to send them all to Twin Valley, which like Leland and Gray, which is 20,000. So it's $2,500 increase. Times 4 students. There's a $10,000 change in the budget, and that's one of the nice things about living in this area is you do have choice. We could control that better if we aligned with the high school. So we said everybody has to go to this school, and if you don't go to that school, you then have to pay any tuition or any other thing you want to do. But that's not one of the nice things about living in the Dover, Wardsboro area. You do have choice, and you can pick which school is best for your child. And there's a lot of good in every one of these high schools, especially the public high schools, and then some of the independent schools work really well for some families, but it's a chore to get them there sometimes too. It's hard to get to Manchester. If you think the mountain over between Wardsboro and Dover is bad, just try driving into Manchester some days. So is there any questions on Article 7? I know, Sue, was that your only?
that was my only question at this point.
Anybody else?
Can I
Yes.
Are you saying that this rate would be for independent students only, not public schools?
No. The public school students, we have to pay whatever the tuition that school charges.
Okay, but if they wanna go to an independent school, we're
Yeah.
only gonna pay,
That amount, that
even
20,000.
if it costs 50, we're only gonna pay 20.
Exactly, yes.
Okay,
And we also, there was a little discussion about it for a while. We pay it directly to the school too. We don't give it to the family. We don't give, because,
I didn't think you did.
no. But, and we also paid it in two payments, 2 installments, so that, if they do leave, and then we do adjust, so say a child was living here and then their family sold their house and they moved out December 15th, you know, they calculate the tuition into a per day amount, and then we would only pay that. We get a refund, or like, let's say we're supposed to make the payment January 15th, and they left January 16th, you know, they adjust the invoices for us. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you.
No, it's a good question, and it's really confusing because people see it every year. They don't know why, if we've agreed to it, why it has to keep going there, but that's not our choice, it's a state law. And I think it was a really good question, so please, you know, if you have others, ask. We may even have answers for you. So is everybody okay with Article 7? We'll move on to Article 8. This is the big one. Shall the voters of the River Valley Unified School District approve the school board to expend $6,845,217, which is the amount the school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year. So again, you know, there's very little that we control in our budget. Somebody asked me, what percentage of the budget do you think you control? And I said, gosh, I really don't know, because you know, we do have a lot of mandates that are forced upon us. So how do we create a budget? You know, so we have to take, we have a business manager, a chief financial officer for Wyndham Central Supervisory Union. He's a very capable, very smart person, who unfortunately is leaving us at the end of December coming up here. So if anybody's really good with business numbers, there is an opening. But, so she works with the administrators in the buildings and with the superintendent to come up with what's needed for the school for an educationally sound, or for a good, solid education. You know, how much they need for staff, what kind of staff do they need, how many of them, you know, what programs are coming up, what needs the building has. A few years ago, we actually hired a facilities and transportation manager, which I tell you has been really valuable. It was funny, Bill Anton towards the end of his career and Matt during the beginning of his career knew more about water systems, I think, than sometimes about educating students, because they were always working with the water, and we seem to always have a disaster come just before the start of school. I know there were some issues here with the water system. We've had issues here in this building with the heat and the roof. And, you know, we hire administrators who are good with education, not that are really, that buildings are not their strong point. So it was a really good, I think a good move by the central office supervisory union to bring a guy in who, that's what he does. He's a professional, and he takes care of our buildings. He also helps with transportation. Wardsboro is a little different than the Dover side, because Dover has some of its own transportation, buses, and also some drivers. Wardsboro's been tied in with the Wyndham Central, because a lot of their students went to Leland and Gray, and it kind of made sense. It all worked out. You actually had your own bus for a while, though. Didn't Bailey drive?
Not that I remember. It was a while ago.
Yeah, you guys did.
Does anyone remember?
Anybody from Wardsboro for like 25 years ago? I thought
25 years ago.
Did Bailey? I thought Bailey drove. I thought Bailey's had a bus that used to drive from Wardsboro.
He did. I
Yeah.
don't know if he would own the bus, but he drove the bus.
Well, it was Bailey Transportation.
Oh, was
What?
it?
I thought that's what was on the side. But anyway, it's not a big deal. It's, I mean, just
You
a
go
historic.
back 70 years with me. With private cars.
Are you sure?
Yes, certain
Oh.
people drove kids to the high school.
Yeah. No, I'm sure. Was it the high school or was it the seminary then?
It was the seminary.
Yeah, cool. So anyways, and what they do is they come up with what they consider to be, you know, an educationally sound budget. And then we review the budget with them and ask some questions. We have an open process where, you know, parents, voters, anybody can come, usually in the early winter, late fall. We try to have our budget put together and vote on our budget sometime the end of January, so that we can put the numbers together. And then we ship that budget off to you folks. So this $6,845,000 seems like a lot of money, but when you have the tuition, you have the requirements that we are now have. We have behavioral people in both buildings. We've had to increase our nursing staff and our healthcare because of some issues with making sure our students are taken care of. COVID was a real mess for us for several years. We're still kind of recovering. There's still some backlash from that with the students being together where they were all alone for a while working on their computer. And so this is like I said, this is a pretty educationally sound budget based on input from our administration and our business office and our supervisory union, and those people that did come. And we do get a few people, not a lot of people, about as many as we have tonight, that come when we discuss the budget. So if you look in your book, starting way in the back on page 20
Oh, you got the whole budget. Okay.
is all the budgets. So if you want to look at the budgets, if you have any questions, you can ask them, and we may have the answers. If we don't have the answers, we will definitely get them for you. But starting on page 20, you have your revenue first, and then about line 31, pre-kindergarten, that's where the expense budget starts. I know we've had a lot of different discussions about how to make this better, and we will definitely take advice from people. But the FY23 actual, we have the FY24 budget, and then we have the proposed budget. So as an example, on line 31 on page 20, our teachers for our pre-kindergarten programs in both buildings, remember it's not divided out by buildings, we're proposing about $102,000. So some of this is, when we put the budget together last year, the negotiations hadn't been completed, so we kind of guessed on where we may wind up. But that's, basically, I believe it's two teachers for the preschool. Then we have paraeducators. Preschool has a whole different set of rules than elementary grades, where you need more help. And there's some things you have to do. You have to have a longer nap time. You have to have a separate area. That doesn't apply here in the labor portion of it. But they have to have their own separate bathroom, and so there's a lot of different requirements. So that's throughout the book. As you get towards the back, I believe it's pretty much on page 24 is your secondary, and you can see under secondary in the 270s. Oh, why can't I find it?
We should a little bit higher,
Maybe your eyes are
250s.
starting to be
Yeah,
like
250s, I'm sorry. Yeah, so anyways, tuition to public schools, we're looking at $1,043,480. Tuition to private schools, $1,024,000 and $62,000 to non-Vermont private LEAs. Again, if you can go to any approved independent or private school, the state of Vermont has a list. We have paid for people to go to school out of the country before because their family may have had some tie, or there was a program that they really liked, but it does allow students to go into programs that really fit them. So just in the tuition for secondary, we're over $2 million, so about a third of the budget. Yes.
Just a question, I can't even look at these because it's too small print.
Yeah.
And I had my eyes tested not long ago, and he didn't want to give me better glasses. So, just a request, next year, find a way to make the print closer to, say, what's on page 25. I know you're not gonna get there, but if you could get a little closer to that, it would be very
Or-
helpful.
A magnifying glass.
The other way. Could
Yeah,
stretch it out
or,
this
yeah,
way.
We've also, we did make some changes so that we had the numbers along the side of the page, so that if people did want to ask a question about a line item, we were having a lot of trouble in the past, trying to get everybody onto the same page. So, anyways, that's the budget. Is there any questions on the budget?
I guess I'm interested in how it's going to affect the rate down the road that none of us know about. Just as someone who's retired now, I'm just finding things are getting really expensive.
I think they're expensive even if you're not retired.
Yeah, so,
Okay, so that's that next page that Dwight mentioned, page 25. Like you
Okay.
said, that's in very big numbers.
yeah,
So,
That we can see.
so again, I get in a lot of trouble, so I've been told that I need to be more specific. So we don't know what's gonna happen up in Montpelier under that golden dome until it's done. And remember that the budget is the last thing they vote on just before they go home. That's why we put our meetings out a little bit. But if you look here, here's kind of a summary for the tax rate projections. So if you look, our year-over-year increases, last year we asked you for $6,532,000. This year we're asking you for $6,845,000. So that's $312,000 difference, roughly. So that's 4.78%. Even, when our inflation rate's up over around 8 or 9 for last year, it's really not a bad increase, but we are losing some students. So year over year offsetting revenues, these are the things that the state, we get money for, either through tuition from other, Stratton is a total tuition town. They don't even have an elementary school, so we get some of the Stratton students. There's some transportation help that we get from the state. There used to be a thing called the Small Schools Grant, which became the Consolidated Schools Grant. That went from $467,000 last year to $205,000 this year. So that's a huge decrease. Even it's over half. And then so our education spending that we have to ask to get tax money for to pay it is actually an increase of 9.47% because we have to we take off the 200 and something thousand plus the 300,000, which is a $574,000 increase. Does that make sense to everybody? How we get to the number that we're going to raise for taxes? So then what we did was there's a thing called the unified tax rate. So the unified tax rate would be, based on these numbers, would be $1.46 last year and $1.50 this year, which is a 4-cent increase, or 2.54%. The LTWADM, does anybody want to guess at that one?
long-term.
You got some of it, go ahead.
Is that the weighted?
Yeah, long-term weighted average daily membership. This is a number I've been joking about my whole career on the school board. So last year we had 412.47 students, and this year we have 452.14. So I always said, whichever part of that 0.14 the student we get is going to determine how expensive they are going to be to educate, because if we just get the feed, it may be harder, but if we get from the top down. But anyways, it's a made-up number that they calculate to determine how much help we're going to get from the state. And that's the it used to be called the per pupil grant, but now it's called I forget what it's called. It's the block of money they give us. The yield is kind of interesting. The yield is how much we're going to get per that average pupil. So if you multiply out the yield times the long-term weighted average daily membership, that tells you how much money the state's giving us. But again, they're really not giving us their money. They're taking a lot of money from us, and then they do their magic with it, and then they return it to us, lesser than we send. And then the cost per pupil, which is kind of used to be there was a penalty. If your cost per pupil went over a certain amount of money, they would penalize you and you would have to pay like more than just that little addition. If the cost per pupil was supposed to be 14,000, you went to 14,600, you would pay on that $600 extra per pupil, you may pay $1,200 per pupil. And that was so that we all kind of stayed the same. And it's really confusing, and if you all want, I can bring a thing at town meeting and we can project on the screen and I can show you the formulas and when you change numbers, what changes. But right now, it's a good show for us because if you look at it, really, we're cutting our per pupil expense by $20 this year over last year. So you would think if we cut it per pupil, maybe we would save some tax money, wouldn't we? No, because so the state has a for homestead. Remember, this is strictly for the homestead people that pay their taxes based on their homestead, which is a house and 2 acres. Okay, so if you have 10 acres, only the house and 2 acres, the other 8 acres aren't considered homestead. They're non-homestead. So this year we're looking at a tax rate of, so here's the other thing that kicks us in the backside. There's a thing called the common level of appraisal, because again, in the old days, it used to just be Dover taxing Dover. So the back then the listers would go out and they'd look at your house in the spring and they would tell you everybody how much your house is worth, and then you would set a tax rate based on your expenses divided into the grand list. So everybody was pretty much the same. Well, now when they went to a statewide property tax, it's not the same 5 listers here in this area as the 5 listers in Burlington. So they need to balance out the where you are on your grand list. So what percentage is your grand list at according to the state when the state reviews all our sales? And remember, in some of our resort towns we have a lot of sales, and in some of our other towns we have almost no sales. So they look at what they call the common level of appraisal. So that's that next group of numbers. So in last year, the common level of appraisal for Dover was 81.34%, and for Wardsboro it was at 103%. So what that means is, in Dover, they said our values were approximately 20% less than where they should have been. But they said in Wardsboro, your values were 3%, almost 4% higher than they should have been. So this year, if you look, the CLA dropped in Dover by almost 10.5%. We're down at 70, almost 71%. And in Wardsboro, they're still over 100%. So then you have to take your base tax rate, multiply it by the CLA or divide it into it, and it gives you your tax rate. So in Dover last year we were at $1.80.13, and this year we'll be at $2.12. So the budget did increase, the amount we have to request in taxes, the CLA dropped. So that's why you have a pretty big, 32 cent variance on the tax rate. But in Wardsboro, their variance is only 7 cents because their CLA only dropped to
2.6.
Yeah, to a little over 2.5%. So, if you give me 1 second, just because it makes it harder to compare apples to apples, obviously. If our CLA was at where it was last year, which was 81.34, the tax rate would only be $1.84. So the tax rate would only be up like 4 cents. So that's why where the CLA really kind of plays havoc. And in Wardsboro, the tax, if the CLA was at the 103.64, their tax rate would be at $1.44.9, which is 3 cents, about the same. So those are all those numbers that kind of add up to make it a little confusing. But on the other hand, if our CLA was at 100%, even though the tax rate would be lower, you'd still be paying the same amount of tax because your value would be 30% higher. So if they say right now your house is worth $100,000, if you were at 100%, your house should be worth $130,000, and that's just really broad strokes because not every property is 30% off. There may be land may be off like 10%, and houses may be off 45%, and townhomes may be off 28%, but it's an average. So it's a hard, kind of a hard thing to come up with. But I just wanted to show that. So that, again, we don't control the CLA, and we don't control the yield, and we don't control how much money the state's giving us. We just control expenditures. And then I got asked to, it used to be really easy. I remember in Dover for a long time, back when we used to meet at the school for town meeting, it used to be a penny raised $40,000. So you knew that if somebody came in and wanted to change a budget by $40,000, you would add a penny to the tax rate. And we could pretty well predict the tax rate because there weren't a whole bunch of factors. It was just the town's grand list. Nowadays, there's just so many changes we don't know. Remember in the past few years, the state has brought down the statewide tax rate by taking surplus money and ERSA money and all the funds that the federal government was throwing at us, and they put extra money. They built the yield up that was quite a bit higher than it is now. We did have the weighting that we felt was wrong, and we felt that's been wrong since the beginning of Act 60 and 68. So that changed. So there's a lot of changes. And so this is the tax rate we're looking at. We did figure it, and it's not an exact science. Like if you cut the budget in half, the tax rate's not going down in half. And that gets confusing too. If you double the budget, the tax rate's not going to double either. But we did find that for the most part, about a penny raises about $32,000. And you know what? I printed it and didn't grab it before I left. Sorry. I think it was. We figured I did a bunch of them, and it was around a penny's around 32,000 within $1.5 million either way. If we went up $1.5 million or down, again, if you cut the budget in half, it's a funny thing. So if I cut the budget in half, or I make the budget $3 million instead of 6.5. 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I don't think anybody's cutting it in half, Rich.
No, but it just to me, it's what makes this so difficult for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
If you cut it in half,
Oh, I found the math.
the tax rate's still $1.50.
So it's $44,000 changes the tax rate by 1 cent.
No, we changed
Oh,
that.
we changed.
Yeah, I have an
took
email.
Such good notes.
I know. I have an email. So when I cut it the budget to $3 million, we're still at $1.50.
So my concern is, that's a lot of money. And there was a time.
Actually, hang on. I lied to you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There was a time when we did, we transported kids to other towns, and that's really irrelevant. We had the bus transportation, and people are driving their kids to Burr and Burton. I guess I personally feel like if we can cut anywhere, it's going with the state rate, and parents pick up the difference for wherever they want to send their child. And as far as Burr and Burton and all these other schools that do have kids, it would be the 19,000 instead of the 20,966. So that would be almost $1,200 saved per student, and that's quite a few students. So that would add up. I know when I had kids in school, I paid extra so that my child went to a private school for a couple of years, a year. And I was thrilled that the state rate was applicable. That really helped. And I don't know if, the other items that are coming up later here on the warnings, if there's any place there that, people will bring up, but that's, I felt and expressed for years, I kind of think we should be doing the state rate, and if parents want to send their kids to other schools, they come up with the additional. And given that we don't know what the taxes are going to be and they keep going up dramatically, given health insurance costs, et cetera, that maybe we need to be more conscious of those expenses.
So just as a point, and the board's never weighed in on that, the board's just presenting facts. You know, but there was a time, and again, every year it changes. For a long time, Leland and Gray and Twin Valley were both much higher, and even Brattleboro was
Yeah.
higher than the Burton rate. So there's always been that argument, and that argument needs to be made under Article 7, not Article 8.
Right. Okay. Tonight I'm just interested in getting the overall and, you know, the other articles.
Yeah, but because that's one of the things, it's tough because Article 9 and 10 also deal numbers that will affect the tax rate as well.
Right.
And that's why it's kind of hard, because it's, you know, you have to stick to the topic at hand. You
Yeah,
can't.
That's why this information,
Right.
no meeting is helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Well, I don't know if we're going to let you ask questions. You're not a voter. No, go ahead.
I know you talked about a revenue loss, but I was just wondering if you guys had to move anything to the local budget from ESSER funding, like some of those positions you mentioned earlier, or any programs.
I'm sorry, try that again.
Did you have to move any from the ESSER funds that you were getting? Were you funding any
The
positions? or
ESSER funds went
programs?
to the SU.
Okay.
And the SU distributed them, and they used them for some programs to help with the loss of learning with the
Okay.
students. And there are some that flowed down to the schools, but that was administered by the central office. And we're still using ESSER funds for another year or so. So we have utilized the ESSER funds, and they have helped with the tax rates, both at the supervisory union, which we would pay a percentage of, and at the local level. Some other schools used them all in the first year or two. And our business manager presented plans to us when ESSER funds first came out, so that we can capitalize on them for a longer period of time, and not to just buy down the tax rate like some places did. Okay? You're welcome. Go ahead.
Is there a breakdown anywhere in this booklet of how many students are in each school and how many
Yeah.
students go to certain
I'm
high
sorry.
schools?
There
On
is,
17.
it's really
Page
tiny.
17.
How many students are in each school?
Yeah, 17, that-
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right,
I'll
that's
look at
right,
that.
sorry. Page 7.
Thank you.
I think that gives more of the secondary. I don't know if it speaks to the pre-K through 6th grades in each of the two buildings. Does that make sense?
I didn't hear you.
So the
The
numbers-
graph on that they just showed you on page 17 is just secondary students. Is that what you were asking?
The graph is, you mean the wheel here?
The whole
Right
page
above that.
is just secondary.
So this is only grades 7 to 12 listed on this page. It doesn't talk about the younger grades,
Oh,
and how many kids are represented.
oh, is that what you said?
That's what I said.
Oh.
Yep.
Okay.
Do you have those numbers? I know usually it's in the book. but
I think it's
not.
usually in the book, and off the top of my head, and I could be wrong
Is it
a
right
couple here or there,
Isn't this
it's
it?
around 85 in Dover and
No,
around
that's the
45 in
breakdown of
Wardsboro,
secondary.
somewhere
Oh, I'm sorry.
around there.
And that's trended upward or downward?
I don't know the trend.
I think it's down.
Is
Everything's
it going down?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's down.
Yeah, but you know what? Just all the people in China need to do is have another bird flu that they convert, and the numbers will go back up again.
There you go.
But are those numbers down from
Yes,
the
they've
previous year?
been down,
Or are they
yes.
down consistently in a graph?
No, there was a spike. I mentioned that earlier. They spiked during COVID,
Yeah.
both in tuition and in our buildings, and then they started coming back down. I mean, I think if you look at the populations, you know, they did count a lot of people that were here during COVID. So if you look at most of the populations in towns, a lot of them went way up and now they're starting to trend back down. But, you know, we do a census every 10 years, so it's, but we will, community.
They have that in next year for 10-year graph.
She said we lost 12%.
Hang on, let me write that as a note in the front of
Are
the
you
book.
gonna do that?
Looking
Yep.
for an estimate of
How many kids
students
are in
going
each building?
forward.
Yeah, over 10 years, you know, we'll see that spike, but we'll be
Yeah.
able to compare before that
I
spike.
mean, yeah. I mean, it's hard to predict, obviously, Rich is saying. You can look in the town report and see how many children were born, and maybe that could give you an indication going forward. But as you said, a lot of people are moving into Vermont and out of Vermont pretty regularly. I did hear some news about some people moving in. We're one of the highest states people moving in, believe it or not.
Hopefully
But I don't know if
we'll
that's
stay
true or not.
around
But
that as
around
opposed
here,
to-
we are last few years have trended down after COVID.
But hopefully maybe these will stay steady.
I feel like in the last, I mean, we had the COVID spike, but overall, I feel like it's, you know, a little dip, but I don't feel like it's been horrendous
Well,
over
I
the
think
last
if you
number of
take out
years.
COVID, it's
Yeah.
not too bad.
Right.
Like
If
What's
you,
the capacity of the two schools?
the ultimate capacity, like how many people could
I
we stick in
think
each
Dover
building?
can have up to 200,
200.
and I think in this building it's 190.
About 100, I would think. Yeah.
If you remember when they voted for the addition in Dover, you know, they were predicting 250 students, and that's why we had to build the big addition. And then Mike Jacobs, who was an actuary that works with insurance companies, you know, he went and he looked over like 30 years previous to that date, and he compared the birth rates, as Dwight said, to the number of students entering kindergarten. And within, I think it was a 10% variance. It was pretty close. But I don't know, I don't think we've ever really updated that since we've combined, and I don't know if it was ever done in Wardsboro. I mean, Mike was a Dover voter and resident, so.
So I think Dover capacity, like you said, was 250, so I don't know.
No, I don't
if-
think the
if it's
capacity was.
reduced.
I think they felt, and then remember that it got voted on 3 times, and that they kept reducing things to
Okay.
get the vote to pass after the second
Okay.
time it was turned down. Everybody good with Article 8? I mean, as good as we can be. Okay, Article 9. So again, this is one of those items that brings up, affects how we do our taxes. So the voters of the River Valley Unified School District fund its capital reserve funds in the following amount for the 24-25 school year. Building improvements of $400,000 and transportation of $40,000, with 50% coming from the general reserve fund. Remember, that goes back to the Article 6. Any surplus we vote into that general reserve fund, which has money in it, and then 50% from being raised in taxes. So it'd be $220,000 we would raise in taxes. And remember, the tax rate that we're showing you has all these numbers already put into it. So if you vote this down, obviously we'll reduce it a little bit. So if you look at page in your book, I believe it's just after this page. Page 19. So let's start at page 18. And actually, page 18, Chris, has your question in it too, where it shows fund balances. Some of the ESSER money in there it's all gone. But anyways, River Valley Capital Plan. So the top one is the capital building plan. So for 25, FY 25, the beginning balance is about $125,000. Again, they're really small numbers. So, but we plan on spending contributing $400,000. So we'd have, and then we have expenditures of $428,000. So we'll end the year with $96,000. And in transportation, we have a reserve balance of around $73,000. We're going to add 40. So we're supposed to replace a bus number 2 for $105,000. So we'll end the year with about $8,000. But there is a tractor that's coming up next year, and we don't know if we're actually going to replace it. And then there's a vehicle for food service. So remember, just like we do on the town capital budgets, we're only voting for this year, but we try to project out because we don't want to have a huge shortfall. We try to kind of fix the highs and lows. And on page, I'll get to you one second, on page 19, we broke it because we did have reserve studies done, so we broke it between the Dover building and the Wardsboro building. So your big expenses in the Dover building is about $300,000 for the roof. If you remember when Act 60 came in, we took advantage and we built you guys like $1.5 million nest egg. And we also replaced the roof on the building because it was close to time, but we figured money was never going to be that cheap. We hoped to starve out Act 60, which we did in only 3 or 4 years, but they replaced it with something worse, which was Act 68. And then there's some painting to be done, and there's some flooring. There's a kitchen hood that needs to be installed for the cooking, and then there's also play structure. There's some money for a preschool play structure, and in the Wardsboro building, we got to work on replacing the fire alarm panel. So those are your expenditures that are the 428, which if you go back to page 18, you know, we projected 428,000 in expenditures. But if you look out through from 26, 27, 28, those are some pretty heavy expenditure years also. So one of the things, and again, we can't do this at the annual meeting, but we can do it like somebody noted now, is, you know, we do have under Article 11 to discuss, you know, should we consider maybe borrowing money for a lot of these and try to do all the repairs in one shot, because, you know, things don't get cheaper as we go down the road. And then maybe it would be cheaper just to bond for that for a few years. So that's something we're going to discuss. But those are the capital improvements that we're recommending to fund. And then we came up with a 50-50 split because, again, in the next article, we're going to ask you to put some money to help offset the operating expenses from the reserve funds too. And we've always kind of tried to leave 2/3 of the reserve funds in every year. We've never wanted to, you know, spend them all in one year because, you know, that's just a recipe for disaster. So that was a thought. And the reason we did the 50-50 is if the voters want to change those numbers and say do maybe 70% from the general reserve and 20% or 30%, it's got to equal 100. Sorry, but you know, we can do that however you want to do it. And again, I believe we're going to use the number of around $32,000 is a penny on the tax rate. So, no.
Sorry.
Your better half goes next. He was, and I asked him to wait a second.
Oh.
Go ahead, Ian.
What dollar, do you have like a dollar number that's a cutoff that makes it capital?
Yeah, it's something I believe it's going to last more than 20 years.
Yeah, it's really it's a one-time expense normally. You know, that the capital, a lot of people have different definitions of capital, but there is a number, I forget what the number is exactly, but it comes down to if it's a single expense. Obviously, a roof is not done every year in those items, so but it has to be a one-time expense and be over somewhere, I don't want to put a number out, but, you know, 20,000 or something like that, whatever that number
Like the
is.
painting, you know, it's been
So that we had work
20
done.
years.
Yeah.
I mean, Leon Boyd was still
Yeah.
alive from last time we painted.
So we had in this building, you can see new windows, we had new windows put in, and it was painted last year, those were capital expenses.
So the reason that I ask is I know this school, the UV disinfections systems are getting old and parts are getting hard to find, and that's about, you know, say 15,000,
Yeah,
something like that. So,
Right.
you know, I'd rather see something like that on this than a 1-year hit, and that's the ones that are in there are 20 years old.
right. Yeah, like I said, it's hard, it depending, it comes down to those two items, the expense, the cost of it,
Yeah.
and also if it's a one-time expense. But we do have items for maintenance in the operational budget as well,
Right.
regular budget.
No, choose next.
It's actually okay, I'm actually looking at the next Article 10. You're on Article 9 right now, right?
Yeah, we're on the expenditure,
so,
on funding the reserve funds, not expenditures. Go ahead, Linda.
So you had mentioned the roof, that's at Dover, right? About 300,000?
Well, it's 600, we're only gonna do 300 the first year.
Okay,
Do
that
the
was
other
my
half next
question.
year.
In the letter, it said 600 range.
Yeah,
But 50% from voters, taxpayers.
well,
right?
that's our recommendation, but it's only the 1 year and it's only the half the roof. Next year, we're gonna
Right.
have to do the other half. Remember that the addition was done about the time Act 60 came in, so it was a couple years difference, and then we had the roof done on the old building. Tony Paleo, I think, was, Joe, yeah, Tony helped us with that, and we did that even though the roof wasn't really bad, and it was a 20-year roof, and we've gotten 25, 26 out of it, but they're having some pretty serious leaks. I almost feel like Wilmington in their old building, you know, put
Even the
buckets
new
out.
building,
Yeah,
the elementary school, the roof was horrid.
yeah. Go ahead, Andrew.
Probably just my eyes, Rich, but the capital budget and plan on page 19, I cannot find the roof. in
Yeah,
there.
if you look up top, Andrew, it is, I just saw it.
Yes,
It's exterior, it's EPDM and PVC roof.
It's like 6
um,
lines
If
down,
you go
Andy.
down under fiscal
Got
year
ya.
Look for the
Thank
big,
you.
look for the big number.
Just look for the 280, look for the
Yeah.
298.
Big number. Why are school roofs flat?
You'd have to go to heaven and ask Rod Williams why he designed a flat roof for Dover. He's the one that designed it. But then
Wait,
when
do
they
we
built
have
the
a flat one
addition, they built a flat one
This one
too.
isn't
Just
flat.
Yeah.
imagine the snow coming off and the poor kids getting off the bus.
That's fun.
It's a risk we should take. I like it too.
Right.
Let's go.
You gotta rush, you gotta run into the school.
Yeah, I don't know.
You ever played Frogger?
It just seems like a really poor.
There was actually talk
Yeah, pick up.
back when I first got on the board about maybe doing doing a peaked roof. But it's a huge area, and the roof would be 10 miles high. It'd block out the sun in West Dover.
Having said that, the roof did last a long time. It's
No, we
the
got
same
over it.
amount of years you put into a pitched roof, so it's not bad.
Yeah. Again, it's always so difficult because, it's, nothing's ever cheap. They're public buildings, so you can't just I could go throw shingles on my roof and, who's gonna care? But, there's requirements you have to meet when you're a public building and, the fire marshal has to get involved and, then you have people up there inspecting everything that's being done. So it's, nothing's ever cheap.
Yeah, it's pretty hard.
Everybody good? Can I move on? If I shocked you enough? So then, Article 10 is, shall the voters of the River Valley School District authorize board to withdraw money from the reserve fund, the general reserve fund, to offset the homestead tax rate, but not more than $200,000. And again, that's what we've been doing in the past couple years. We've been buying down the tax rate, and we've been lucky because, with the exception of a couple COVID years, we've had surpluses, and we've been able to cover our shortfalls when we actually had deficits because we had money in the reserves. And again, it was a big discussion in Dover for years, and it's been the same discussion in River Valleys. But I do recall a discussion. I went to the last couple Wardsboro school district meetings, and we don't want to take it all away in one shot. So it's kind of trying to be a balance act. So that's why we recommended the 200,000. Again, that's can be amended by voters.
So where do we see that reserve fund? Is that
Yeah,
page
that's that
18?
page where I said the ESSER money. It's page. Oh, go to page 18. So it's the box up top. So
Okay.
food service has around a $30,000 surplus, but we don't mess with that. Our
Okay.
general reserve fund is $1,148,000. The special reserves, so those are reserves that are locked in. We can't just spend them on anything. 47,451. Student activity, that's when the students raise money for something. We account for the money, it goes into an account. So like the 5th grade raises money for Kuwait, and the 6th grade raises money for the class trip. The Capitol building, I'm sorry, when I said special reserves, so those are monies that come into us from like, for title or for special programs. And so they have strings attached to them, so we can't just do what we want. So they stay in that special reserve fund. And then right now in the Capitol building, we have the 234,000, and in the Capitol transportation, we have 130. So it totals a total of 1.274, but again, it's not all liquid cash for us. Some of it's got strings attached to it, and some of it's been dedicated. And the reason, if you remember, we went to, we used to just keep everything in a general reserve fund, but again, we were kind of concerned that some people, may look at those numbers and say, hey, that's our money. We gave that to you, so we want it back. There are some districts that have several $million in reserves, and there's some districts that have nothing in reserves, and they're always scrambling. And again, remember, we try to use that to try to even out the tax rate. We didn't do that good this year, but there was a lot of pressures on this year that are beyond our control.
So you were saying on the reserve fund, you try to keep what percentage?
Around 30%.
Around.
No, we
not
try to
take
spend
out more than-
right than a third.
Don't take out more than a third.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any questions on that article? So the Article 11, this is that other, we can talk about things, but we can't take action, so y'all can't say, I want the school buses painted bright pink because I think they're safer. And even if 98% of the people there vote for it, it's not mandatory that the board do it. The board should take recommendation because remember the following year you'll be voting for 2 other board members and maybe their positions will be at jeopardy because they didn't listen and paint school buses fluorescent pink. I don't know, but so the 3 items that we just threw out there that we just wanted to bring up is, if you remember when we met during COVID under the tent in the Wardsboro front yard, I think it was like the beginning of June, end of May, website update, we did get approval for some money for the website. Chad isn't here tonight, but Chad has been a real driving force behind that, as was Mark Schaubert before him. I believe it's now, you can go on the new website. There are still some bugs to be worked out, but what doesn't have bugs that don't need to be worked out. And it's way, way beyond my technological expertise, so that's why other people are going to talk to you about it. The school construction repairs versus new future construction aid. There, and with one of my other hats that I have, the state went through and looked at the construction, their recommended cost for construction per square foot, and they were woefully way, way off base. So I thought that was a good thing because I thought maybe the legislature is going to put some money away for, for help us with school construction, but that didn't last very long. And then they made us all go test for the PCBs, and we do have some PCB issues in the Dover building, but not so much in the Wardsboro building. Came out clean. But because of what happened up in Burlington, and if you're not aware of it, their school was really, really bad. So they had to move out, and they're going to knock it down. And so the legislature put away X number of millions of dollars, and Burlington's going to use about 90% of it, I guess. So we're not even sure now that we test it and we know all this, that if there's any money left over for help us with PCBs. We did dodge another huge bullet. Believe it or not, we had a test for radon, and both buildings tested negative for radon. That just recently came back, I think, a couple meetings ago. So we have gotten lucky, and actually, our PCB results were not bad enough like Burlington where we couldn't be in the building. We had to set up some air handlers. We had to come up with a plan, and they do allow us to occupy those buildings. And again, it's funny. It's like every time we have a new administrator, they get something new thrown at them. And Tracy came on board in Dover this year for her first year, and even before school started, like 2 days or the day before school starts, we get the results of the PCB testing. And, so we try to get that out really quick to folks. And then the research of bonding to accomplish several building projects, that's what we were talking about earlier. We could, if there was a strong feeling from the voters, we could maybe look at saying, okay, let's take the next 4 years worth of capital projects, which are pretty large. The alarm systems, the hood, the roof. There's a bunch of water work that needs to be done in this building because of piping, with lead issues. Do we want to say borrow $2 million and pay that back over 5 years, and then we get all our projects done early on before the prices go? Building materials seem to go up 10% every year. Those are low increases. During COVID, you couldn't get PVC stuff for a long time. A piece of drain pipe that we used to pay $8 or $9 for was like $45. Some of that's come back down, but it has stayed up. And if that's something that folks feel strongly about, that's something the board can look into, and we can either present it at next year's meeting or we could have a special meeting. That was it. And then anything else that may come up from the voters, from you guys. Anybody?
Just a general question. I know you spend a tremendous amount of time on the budget, right? Based on that, do you personally, do you feel the way the state funds public education, do you feel it's sustainable for the future?
If the state does what it seems to be doing, which is getting rid of students by making it harder and harder for people to live here, and then that is almost like and this is just a personal, this is not,
I understand.
but it's getting to be very, very difficult. They throw a lot of requirements on us. They do all during Act 46, and remember, we've been, I was on the school board before Act 60, and it's been a real uphill battle almost every year, because they look at a map and they say, wow, look, Wardsboro, Dover, and Marlboro, you're only 5 miles apart. And when we were doing the study committee, there was Randy Capitani was on it, and his comment was we should call it the not connected by paved roads or connected by dirt roads district, because the three towns don't, even though they touch each other, there's not a decent paved road that connects any of the towns. The only way we're connected is Upper Dover Road, Lower Dover Road, the South Wardsboro Road. And do we want to put our little kindergarten and preschooler kids on a bus for half an hour going Route 100 between Dover and Wardsboro? So there's a lot of things that make education in Vermont very expensive. Where if we were this size in some flat state, I don't know, somebody can tell me a flat state, but wouldn't it be a lot easier? And then you don't have these snowstorms, that when we were connecting with Marlboro, Route 9, how many times is that road closed because you can't pass on it? So, and then we don't get we're not like a Burlington, we don't get that, we don't have 25 students in a class. And I know a lot of us, and I taught some, when I was teaching DARE, in combined classes, and I thought they were kind of neat. We had combined classes in Dover, we have them here. They're neat, but it's a real hardship on a teacher, because they got to teach 4 different topics, math, science, social studies, reading, writing, and then they double that because they're teaching 2 grades or 3 grades. So it's, you say, well, there's only 10 or 12 students, but it's really, they're only getting half the time with the teacher, because then they have to work with the other grade. And sometimes that's a positive, because the younger students maybe pick up something from the older students, maybe the older students get to reinforce, but there's all these different aspects that make it very difficult. At one time I remember Peter Shumlin saying that, we, in the state of Vermont, we have less students than they do in the New York City public school system. So I said, and maybe we shouldn't have but just one district. And I said, well, then, we're a pretty small state. Maybe we shouldn't have a governor. We should just let New Hampshire's, it is expensive to live in a rural area. it's hard because, you know, it's not like we can build a school and everybody walk to that school. You know, there's transportation issues. And my big fear is that those students whose families have the means will always be okay. It's the students that families don't have the means, or like the family has one car and dad takes it to work during the day and mom takes it to work in the afternoon. So unless we transport that student and get him back and forth, he can't participate, they can't participate. And not only can't they participate, but they have to make sure they make that bus home. And if they need extra help, they can't get it because we can't get them home. You know, and it's not like everybody lives around the schools. And there's just so many things that make it so difficult to educate students in Vermont. But I think we do a really good job because I always brag to people in the state that Dover was a 6-to-1. So for every dollar we spent, we had to send $5 to the state back under Act 60. And the town voted to have a preschool that cost $60,000 because we had to, you know, have the extra bathroom, we had to build a wall, we had to do all this different stuff. So for us to do that 60, we sent $300,000 to the state. But look what that did for our education, and now we have a preschool in both buildings that, you know, even though you can tuition wherever you want, that's what the law says. A lot of our families keep their students here, you know, unless they happen to be working in Brattleboro and it's hard for them to get back here to pick up their child. Almost all our families do use our preschool. You know, that's not that way in other towns. So I think it's going to have to be sustainable because we can't send our preschoolers and kindergarten and first graders to Townsend or Brattleboro or Wilmington to bigger centers. Yeah, I think they got to figure out a new funding. I think the weights will really help, but again, they told us with Act 60, you got to wait, you got to let it play out, you got to see how it's going to work. But they don't like the weights, so they're already trying to change the weights. They haven't given it a chance. And why do they not like the weights? Because it really helped these very rural communities and it hurt the more urban communities. So, you know, what's going to happen? I don't know. Can I do one more soapbox thing? There's a really good article from a 1960s Vermont magazine, I think it was the predecessor to Vermont Life, where this guy is talking about, because of the one person, one vote, you know, it used to be in the old days, in Vermont, every town had a representative, and each county had 2 senators. And that's kind of based on the federal model, right? Every state gets their congressman, and then you get 2 senators. And that's when they said, no, we're going to have to go by population. And this guy said, I predict in the next 20 to 40 years, the landscape of Vermont's going to change immensely by each town having their own representative. The big cities big urban areas couldn't kind of just run roughshod over all the smaller areas. But when that changed, so when you have 6 representatives in Brattleboro and 1 for Dover, Stratton, Jamaica, Wardsboro, you know, that's a big change. And so I don't know how it's all going to play out. But it's something that we as a board have worked very hard to try to make your education, again, educationally sound, taxpayer-friendly budget. This year, it's not as taxpayer-friendly, especially if you live in Dover. A little better if you're in Wardsboro.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy with the budget. I think, you know, you look around the state, you guys are all educated if you're here. You see the numbers in the northern part of the state, there's 20% increases in their budgets. A lot of them are getting shot down. I mean, for us to be only up 4.7% is, I think it's a testament to the people who are working in the district who put this together.
Do you keep track of, like, I don't know how long ago this was, but at one point it was like 30% of all budgets didn't pass. 30, yeah.
We don't track that.
You don't pay attention.
Andy and I are very big in agreement on. We really like a live vote because we can talk about things. And if you remember a few years ago, the Burton rate came up, and I remember sitting by Kate and Rick Thorpe, and we were like, oh my gosh, this is going to get voted down. it would seem weird. And then somebody brought up a fact of, I think it was, there's no transportation included. How much did we pay for secondary transportation to the public schools? And then it really wasn't that different, and people who had brought it up and wanted to change it then agreed to leave it as it was. That only happens when we can have a discussion. And I've joked a lot, but if we do a ballot vote for a budget, so people who vote yes are gonna probably somewhat agree with the budget. Maybe it's not perfect, but people that vote no, did they vote no because, we chose not to fund a position or a program? So they voting no because the budget's too low? Are people voting no because they feel the budget's too high and we should have reduced something? Are they voting no because the principal or teacher disciplined their child and they're upset? Or they have an axe to grind because they don't like the board, or they brought something?
We don't like the mascot.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. You don't like the mascot.
It's an actual
Who doesn't
thing.
love our
That's
mascot?
an actual thing, by the way. You can look it up.
Yeah. So, it's nice that we can sit there and have a discussion too. And work this all out. And I've found one time in all the town meetings I've been to where somebody kind of disrespected a person by bringing something up they shouldn't have about the person, which had nothing to do with what we were discussing. But for the most part, even when we disagree, we can all have a really good discussion about it, and that helps the board a lot. You folks coming tonight helped the board a lot. I was actually figuring nobody's going to show up.
Yeah, really glad everyone came.
And again, when you look at the total number of voters we have, 2,000 in Dover and 1,200 in
No,
Wardsboro.
less than that, yeah.
3,000 people, and we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
You got 5%.
9, 8 of them. The percentages aren't great, but
This is my first time,
Oh, welcome.
but
you've been to the annual meetings.
but not,
The
no,
meeting before.
I've not done a River Valleys since it's been
But
that.
the other thing that's important too is we do start discussing the budgets in November, December. We settle on them in January, by the second meeting in January. Please come to those meetings and give us input. We do have some people that come in and ask questions. We're usually even less I have a less idea of what the tax rate's gonna look like, because, they just started in Montpelier. And especially the first year of the biennium, it's really hard to figure out. And then, we do 3 of these. We usually do the month of the annual meeting. We do both meetings, we discuss it. Our articles of agreement require us to do this meeting specifically. That's all we're gonna discuss tonight, is the annual meeting in the town opposite of where we're meeting. So next year we'll be in Dover. We'll meet and discuss it within 10 days before the annual meeting. And I'm pretty sure the annual meeting is supposed to be the last Tuesday. Andy may know something. Last Tuesday in April. So it'll always be the Monday before the last Tuesday in April, which is unfortunately sometimes winds up on school vacation week and sometimes it doesn't.
So when should the state have it nailed down as far as?
When they vote the budget. And there is so it's interesting too, because you would think that the education committees in the House and Senate would really work on this, but it's actually in finance. So finance gets to decide, what our tax rates are going to look like, and they decide that by, how much extra money they have, what they can do for, what the projections are. In Dover, for years and years, we never told the state what we were doing because we didn't want them to shuck and jive, and that's what happened this year. A lot of towns said, "Oh, look, we can use this cap. We can fix some things that we've been putting off." A lot of schools have not fixed roofs, and they've worked with the leaks, and they've not fixed the infrastructure because they wanted to keep, the educational program good. So this was kind of, for 25 years, 30 years, some of these towns have been really struggling. And so they're like, here's kind of a gift. Well, of course, there are no gifts in government. They all have strings. And so, some people started advertising it, some newspaper people started reporting it, and then all of a sudden the state says, "Oh no, this isn't going to work," and look how quick they changed that law. But they didn't change it real quick when those schools were struggling. They couldn't hire people. So the state board just met in Whitingham, which was really interesting because we did a tour, and one of the things is they hired a music teacher. And you would never think this would make a difference. They found a younger teacher who was really excited, wanted to move to Vermont, they spent 2 months trying to find a place to live. And they couldn't, so the closest they could get was, they couldn't even get anything in Bennington. They had to go, what's just Pownell, I think, or somewhere down there. And then they found something like Guilford Way or something, but not even in Brattleboro could they find anything that was affordable for, a teacher with a couple years' experience. So they have no music teacher now. Which is tough, and that's a small school. Burlington, I think, has all the music teachers they need. But it's hard to live in this area too, in Dover, Wardsboro. So, we unfortunately had a tragedy for, in this building, and they spent a lot of time and interviewed a lot of people, and a lot of people that applied, and we would have been glad to have them as a teacher here, but they, chose to teach somewhere else because they want to live in that area. So that's another thing that makes it difficult. I always joked under Act 60, you want to make sure it was all equal. Well, maybe you should equalize teachers. Maybe the state should make people come here and teach, and maybe the state should, level our roads and pave our roads, or, make it, level the mountains so they and protect us from snow. I don't know. It's. You guys got any thoughts?
I think we did a pretty comprehensive review.
Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you for the work that you put into the budget, and for being reasonable and diligent about bringing it up less than 5%. I appreciate that. And if people aren't showing up, it might be because they know you're doing a good job. And they get their little book and they look in there and they say, all right, well, it's not their fault. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Andrew. We appreciate that. Everybody okay? Anything
If
else?
I could just make one comment in regards to that. I think a lot of people, and I include myself prior to this meeting, not coming is because in the past, I've heard, and I believe it, that there's so many mandates that come from the state that the local input, you can make input as far as whether you want to spend the money this year or wait till next year. But as far as what you have to have or what you can do without, there's not a lot you can do as far as yes or no. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
So, if you want to come off of that too, Laura's not here tonight because she has to go up there to the Golden Dome. But, one of the things that we've talked about as a board, and both, I believe probably Wardsboro was discussing the same thing as Dover did for years. So, and Andy was kind of going there, and you're going there. So, secondary tuition, we have no choice. We got to try to figure out a number, and we make that number. But again, it goes up and down based on students. We can't tell people you can't move into town, or you can't have your kid, or your child can't go to this school because it's too expensive. Then we have contracts with the professional staff, being the certified staff, professional. I don't like the term professional because everybody I think that works in the school is very professional. But there's some people that have a contract, so that gets negotiated. So we're we have to pay that amount. And then we have the health insurance, which now we don't even control. We used to be able to negotiate our health insurance co-pays and plans and stuff through the contract just locally, but now the state does that. What was it, 14% increase?
14% increase.
So 14% increase in health. And remember, she does a really nice graph, and Lori's going to be sorely missed. But if you look in the back, which I think is very impressive with our district, and I've seen other numbers, but if you look on page 26, 88% of what we ask you to give us to spend on our students go to the students. Direct support is 78%. Operation of buildings is 10. Administration board is 10. Technology is 2, and capital investments is 2%. But that's a pretty good number. There's some places that number's down in the 70s and 60s. And even our administration, the central office does wonderful things for us. In Dover, back when we were trying to, we were having a crisis on our resource room, and we needed to almost hire a new resource teacher. Their curriculum coordinator, education people came in and really worked with us, and then the curriculum now is coordinators at the district levels working on a new program for reading. Reading is the foundation of all education. If a child can read, in the younger years before second or third grade, they tend to have a much better success. And then the teachers aren't teaching, the teachers are helping the students grow. They're reading to them. So we have, with all that secondary out of our control, the contracts out of our control, the health insurance out of our control, so we could cut a staff member. We could say we're gonna have one less teacher. So we're just burdening other staff because somebody has to pick up that slack. So really all we can control is we can control the little extras in the building, which isn't a big percentage. So we could say, hey, the preschool kids shouldn't have a playground to play on. They can't play on the bigger things, so we'll just bury a tire and they all have to run over the tire. Do we want that for our kids? So there's very little that we can control. I was asked to come up with a percentage, and I did talk, Lori and I, the business manager, talked for about an hour, and it's really hard to come up with because, there's a lot of differences, but there isn't a lot that we really do get to control. I mean, you can tell us we're going to cut $200,000, reduce your budget by $200,000. We would have to sit down and we would have to have a discussion with our administrators in the central office and see what programs we want to reduce. Do we reduce transportation? Do we reduce the extras, that make it special for the children? Do we reduce the IB program, which a lot of the Dover people like? To reduce the STEAM money we spend towards STEAM in this building, which, made the buildings unique, we each have their own flair. But there really isn't a lot there without cutting bone. So, and we really would love it if you tell that to everybody too, because you can't force people to come to these meetings. So, yeah.
I just want to say though, I think not coming because you feel like you can't have anything changed, it's still important to get your voice out there and be heard, because I think I gain better understanding in what's going on. I've spent some time in the Ways and Means Committee this last year at the state, horrible committee, but they're a big driving force of what we are able to do. So it gives you a better understanding, and I just think if everybody says, well, I'm not gonna go because my voice isn't gonna make a difference, then we're sunk. So I think it's just good to stand anyway. That's just my plug.
Sure, parting shots.
I don't know if I can ask this question.
You can ask anything you want. We don't know if we can answer it.
What stops the two schools now that they're combined from having one principal? And I'm sure there's rules. So since there's less students, could one principal ever cover both schools?
It would be a little
I've been
different.
asked that, that's why I'm
It
asking
would
you.
it would be difficult, but that's a conversation we could definitely have. And that is very appropriate to be brought up under other business, and we do make notes. And the first thing we do after the annual meeting is we reorganize the board, and then we review what happened and what was brought up at the annual meeting. So we have looked into that. We did go from a half-time in Wardsboro to a full-time on the recommendation of the central office and the staff in both buildings, because they were really looking for some leadership on this. We changed the curriculum a little with the STEAM, so it added some extra work, and we also wanted to, not burn out people. So that was one of the reasons why we went with the full-time administrator here, and it's probably a good thing because our full-time administrator here for the first 4 months of school was a full-time classroom teacher almost. On top of, putting some huge additional burden on the other classroom teachers because we were short a person. We even tried to find a long-term sub. We couldn't find a long-term sub. It was
We did
difficult.
eventually.
We did,
We
but I
did,
mean.
but it was a lot of work. It was
we
a lot
didn't-
of
We didn't
effort.
know if we would.
That's kind of what the general public doesn't hear, is the problems that you're having with each school. So people say, well, why can't they figure that out, you know? But they're not hearing your side of it ever. And
Well,
most people go to so many meetings, like,
I do recall while we were talking about the makeup of the River Valley School District, I did make a comment at one public meeting where I said, well, that's not what we said, and if you read the paperwork we sent out, and the person said to us, I'm not gonna get it exactly right, but I'd rather not read the facts, I'd rather talk to people and take the flavor of what I'm hearing. and go, wasn't it something
I think
similar?
you're right.
And it was just, it was sort of like, wow, that's tough.
With the facts.
Don't confuse me with the facts.
So,
yeah, you
but-
win for lead.
yeah,
Well,
Well, I'm a visitor and I hear an awful lot of complaints, as you can imagine, about high taxes. So, people even cry to me, I can't pay, I can't pay.
oh, do you know
What
something?
do you do?
Well, and so here's something else too, and I don't know this number either. I've been told, but gotta go back to the good book again. Go to the last page of the good book. Page 28, and this is the 3-year comparison. This was something that came about when Jim Douglas was governor. So they want us to show you the last 3 years, and again, you know, because of all the different numbers they throw at you. But if you look down bottom, it says prorated union income cap percentage for members of the River Valley Unified School District. And in 22 it was 2.83%, it dropped to 2.66, 2.58, and this year it's going to be up around 2.95%. Does anybody know what that is?
What does that mean?
Well, I'm going to tell you, but I just want to know if any of you know.
I have no idea.
Okay, so remember I talked about a homestead earlier? So your homestead tax rate is the one that gets adjusted, and this was the way they made Act 60 work, was they said that that we want your house and your 2 acres is your homestead, and that's where we want relief for local people, right? But that has all sorts of issues because that's discriminatory against those that can't vote. So what they came up with the homestead and the non-homestead, okay? So if any of you own more than 2 acres, everything over 2 acres, well, they have a little benefit for up to 10. So let's say you have 20 or 30 acres, your family farm that's 150 acres, been in the family for 4 generations, right? Everything but that homestead portion is considered non-homestead, and it pays a flat rate. Doesn't matter what the school budget is, okay? You know, I have a business. My office pays that flat rate. The garage, Hescock's garage up there, pays flat rate. It's not a homestead, right? It's only the homestead, but there's a thing for income sensitivity, okay? So your income sensitivity says you'll never pay more than a certain percentage of your income if your income is less than X number of dollars, and I forget the number. You will only pay I forget what the number is, 2% of your income for your homestead taxes. It doesn't include the municipal side, okay? But because you get to vote, because you're a resident and you get to vote, they adjust that income sensitivity by the school budget also. So if you approve this budget and you don't make more than that magic number and you just have a homestead, doesn't matter that, you know, the taxes on your property would have been $10,000. If you only make $10,000, you're only going to pay 2.95%, which is $300, 200. I mean, I'm trying to do the numbers quick, but so somewhere, and Linda may have that number, and you may have that number for Wardsboro. I think it's less than 10% of the people pay by property value. Most everybody in our communities pay by income sensitivity. So again, that's always been kind of one of those things that, you know, they want to make sure that if you vote an increase in your budget, that it affects your pocketbook. It's not a direct effect that, you know, I vote an extra $1,000, I take an extra, you know, my percentage of $1,000 out. But if you vote to increase your budget, then it can cost you if you pay income based on income. So, do you remember the number? Didn't we ask that number?
I don't
I
remember that.
remember it got brought up. Pardon? Yeah, I don't remember where I heard that, but I know it's a really high percentage paid by. Does anybody know the number? It's like, Chris Mays, you're gonna write an article about it, so. Do you know the number?
No.
Is it like 60,000 a person?
I think it used to be that a few years back.
Yeah, so it's gotta be higher now, or is it households?
It's about 138 per household, 135 in that range.
135,000?
Between,
If you're
yeah,
under that, you think.
yeah, if you're under that, you still get, it's based on the assessed value of the home, of the
income
homestead.
sensitivity part?
Yeah, the income sensitivity is based on
That's your
the assessed value and the income per house, the household income. When you file your property, when you do your income taxes with the state of Vermont, that's when it gets, that's how they figure it out. And you get a letter saying this is how much your taxes will be reduced by.
So are you saying if you're eligible for income sensitivity, which I think something like 70% of the population is,
Maybe that's the number I heard. Where'd you get that from?
pulled it out of my brain.
84%
Like
of
I
all
might have-
statistics are
I
made
might
up.
have read it somewhere in the past. So, yeah, don't, that may not be right, but the majority of the population is under income sensitivity.
But it's also a sliding scale, I believe, too.
Yes.
Right.
So, again, and
So is
so
that
let's make it really confusing so nobody can
2.95?
understand.
Yeah, so are you saying that for 2025, it's 2.95%?
Right, prorated union
So
income cap percentage
Let's say
for members.
3%.
Right,
Are you saying that people who have income sensitivity eligibility, don't their homestead rate and their municipal tax rate
No,
go
no,
more
it
than
just-
3%?
no, it's just the school district
So
rate.
it's just the school?
Right, it doesn't affect municipalities,
Okay.
it just affects the school rate.
I have the number, it's 128,000 for 2023.
Okay, so I mean, it's gonna go up,
Yeah.
it goes up by, again, these are all those calculations that they do up north somewhere.
That's the hard part, not knowing what your rate,
Yeah,
what we're gonna be taxed.
Again, it was
but
so
you
easy.
can't really plan for
yeah.
it.
This
it's
is
really
gonna be your
difficult.
tax rate. If you increase it by 40,000 or decrease, your tax rate goes up or down a penny. And it was an exact science, and again, everybody paid by taxes, nobody paid by income.
Yeah, I think most
Or
of
by
us-
property
I
tax.
think we all know that you guys work really hard on this, and it's just the not knowing where it's going to be, so how we can plan.
So we've been, though,
And they
we,
never go down.
we've been very close over the last 20 years of nailing the rate. Some of it's because we wait later to have a meeting versus having it in February or March votes. There's a lot of and we really do work hard with trying to play with the numbers. I used to get all the stuff from the business manager's office at AOE, and then they stopped allowing me to have access to it because I was really good terms with Brad James up there, so I got everything as a business manager's got it. Because when Dover didn't participate with Wyndham Central, Mary Lou did our taxes, and then Patty after her, so we always were able to look at it. So now I'm using an older program and it doesn't work as well. And they've also changed the way the taxes work. So again, that 32 is a rough number, and by me changing the 10%, it's all rough numbers. But we'll be really close. And then we always hope too that everybody's taxes look really crazy, because when everybody in the state looks really high, that's when the state always finds some money to throw in to bring that base rate down.
That's true.
Is everybody good?
Guys.
Thank
Okay,
you.
well, we really appreciate you all coming, and we hope to see you all next Monday. Andy, in
Tuesday.
no, Monday you have to go see Andy.
Oh, right,
We
Monday
want
is
you to
Andy.
vote on Monday.
Michelle,
Michelle,
Gotta go
to
vote. All right.
and vote early, vote often. That's how they do it in Chicago. And then we'll see you on Tuesday at 7 o'clock.
Yep, thank you, everyone.
Dover, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.